Shalom and welcome to Inside Israel News, your source for unbiased and thorough analysis of Israeli news, politics, and current events in the Middle East. I'm your host, Mensch-Kight. Well, it's been an incredible week for news, that's for sure. Inside Israel News is back. I'm a little bit late with this episode. I've been under the weather with the usual seasonal cold that I get. Runs through the whole family around about this time of year. So if my voice sounds a little subpar today, that's because it is. And reports of my death are only mildly exaggerated. I am just death warmed over today. Starting to get better, but while I could put off the episode to recording at a better time, unfortunately, the news does not stop because I'm not feeling well, and there's so much to do now. If I could do 3 episodes on this, so it's getting like that. So let's just dive right in. An Israeli delegation is on its way to Washington to talk about the Iran deal. The Biden administration remains committed to trying to go back to the Iran deal, and they are sending signals through back channels, basically, that this delegation isn't going to change anyone's minds and what have you. So public and private signals from the Biden administration, they intend to press forward with this almost bullheaded, borderline psychotic effort to reinstitute the Iran deal that has never been upheld by Iran, even when the Obama administration first negotiated the deal. So interesting approach there, but kind of what we come to expect from the Biden administration thus far. Meanwhile, they've given a great deal of money to the Palestinians and tried to resume peace negotiations. So, no surprise, there's violence. Every time somebody tries to start a major thrust for peace, there is violence. And so now there are riots and demonstrations throughout the Palestinian territories, so to speak, and in al-Fam and a couple of Arab communities in Israel, and there is much consternation. There have been violent clashes in Jerusalem between far-right and pro-Palestinian groups. I'm going to cover that just a little bit more in detail a little later. And there's rockets being fired from Gaza into Israel. Now, why is this happening? Again, there's talk of a peace deal. Anytime there's a push for peace, Jews die. It's just unfortunate reality of the situation. As I mentioned with Dennis Ross and the missing piece, there was an attempt to negotiate a good peace deal, what would for the Arabs have been a good deal, certainly during the Clinton administration. And when Arafat sabotaged that, they went to the Second Intifada, which a number of Arabs have figured out was a big strategic mistake. But now there's talk of a third intifada. Great. Israel also doesn't have a permanent and stable government, and Israel's perceived weakness there is definitely contributing. Now, there have been some military measures taken to step up security around the Gaza Strip. They've shut down a fishing zone where Gaza fishers are able to operate so that cannot be used for terrorism and that sort of thing. Bibi Netanyahu and Benny Gantz approved the operation and sought cabinet approval eventually. There's always this story, and I think it's kind of funny that, every time there's some kind of military operation, there's always some headline somewhere, Prime Minister attempted to initiate military action without cabinet approval. This happens every time, people. Why is there outcry about this? It often happens that the prime minister and the defense minister will go to the military, get everything planned and ready, have the entire operation laid out, and basically ready to pull the trigger, and then they go to the cabinet and get final approval. This is, I guess you could call it planning, preparation, readiness. Ready to pull the trigger. But no, the prime minister does not have, except in certain emergency situations, the ability just to authorize military action on his own recognizance. So yes, the cabinet is required. But there's always this, they tried to do it on their own. And it's like, surprise, surprise. This is the headline we get every time, especially when there's a right-wing prime minister. Now, when there's a left-wing prime minister, You may be familiar with this phenomenon. They walk on water. They can do no wrong. They are the next candidate for sainthood by the Catholic Church, even though Jewish. And, everything they do is erudite and well thought out, and the process was perfect and flawless execution, all that kind of good stuff, right? But when it's a right-wing government, obviously they can do no right. Right, so in this episode, I'm going to cover 3 more things, having discussed the news thus far. I'm going to talk about Jewish versus Arab extremism in the recent demonstrations and such in Jerusalem especially, and draw out for you some lessons about the conflict from that. And then after the break, I'm going to come back and talk about the Arab situation, both the political situation with the Arab Israelis and issues with the so-called Palestinians and their politics, some of the things that are going on there. And I'll wrap it up by talking about some of the political jockeying that's going on kind of at the last minute as Bibi's running out of time to form a coalition. And things are getting down to the wire, where President Rivlin says Yair Lapid will be given the mandate to form a coalition. So that's going to be all sorts of interest and fun there. But let's buckle in for the first segment here. So headlines over the weekend, there was a demonstration by hard-right Israeli Jews in Jerusalem, at which demonstration they shouted such slogans as "Death to the Arabs." All right, this is not cool. And I will tell you, I wholeheartedly condemn this attitude, and as would any decent Jew, in my opinion. I don't see how you can believe in our faith and chant a desire to kill other people. Murder is morally wrong in Judaism, and that's just the fact. Now, if someone is trying to kill you, an individual person is actually trying to kill you, you have a right to self-defense, and that's a little bit different measure. Okay, so in war, we have to fight wars, and we have to defend ourselves as a community. But advocating that kind of murder is just un-Jewish, in my opinion. And that's the opinion of the overwhelming number of Jews. So we have these few radical nut jobs go out there, and 99.98% of Jews in the world will condemn even that they should say death to the Arabs, right? And obviously these are people who are unfriendly to Israeli government's right and left efforts for peace and this kind of thing. And they've had clashes with the police. They're unruly, right? We have them too, basically. Everybody, every group of people has a few nut jobs, a few radicals who are out there, and this is ours. Now, it's very important that you understand, though, that these are people who are shouting slogans and protesting. They're getting into some violent clashes with the Arabs, but in large part, the Arabs like to get out there and clash with these kinds of people because it's so rare an opportunity. Jews just don't act like this most of the time, and so they like to get out and try to start fights. It creates a moral relativism for them, in their opinion, when you get a few idiot Jews who go out and chant death to Arabs. Yet, like I said, just for chanting, just for protesting, just for holding that view, we condemn them. Meanwhile, on the other side, among the Arabs, they chant, slaughter the Jews, not death to the Jews, slaughter the Jews, they say this frequently in Arabic, and it does not mean, gently kill the Jews or kill 1 or 2 Jews. It means like annihilate the Jews. It's a slogan that the Nazis would have been good with if they'd spoken Arabic. Slaughter the Jews, kill them all. And then, more than just protesting, rioting, and what have you, they actually proceed to do that. Arab terrorists will sneak into people's houses, Jewish houses, in the middle of the night and stab to death men, women, and children. They will walk along the streets in Israel, which should be safe for people, and stab old women and old men and murder them. They will drive over people with cars. They will blow up buses, and they will fire rockets at schools. And this really defines the difference, I think, in the conflict here. On our side, on the Jewish side, we hear a few people chanting fanatical things, and we condemn them wholeheartedly. On the other side, not only do they not condemn them, they celebrate them. Terrorists who murder Israelis and go to prison or are themselves dispatched, for example, homicide bombers who blow themselves up to kill large numbers of people, their families get pensions from the Arab government, from the Palestinian Authority. Oh, yeah, those same people the Biden administration just sent hundreds of millions of dollars to. $250 million, $250 million. How much can that buy, right? That's what these people do. And every charitable effort toward the Arabs ends up resulting in the same thing. The European Union gave the Gaza Strip a whole bunch of concrete in hopes that they would use it to build homes. Instead, they built a whole bunch of tunnels into Israel with the hopes of donning Israeli military uniforms and terrorizing Israelis. And thankfully, Netanyahu's government a few years back was able to find these tunnels and defuse the situation ahead of time. But we can just imagine what would have resulted, the confusion, if a bunch of Hamas terrorists were running around Israel wearing IDF uniforms, and obviously kidnapping civilian soldiers and whoever they can get their hands on. So this is what results in these situations. So if you're a terrorist in the Arab side, you get celebrated. Your family gets a pension, and they run around, chanting people's names and carrying their pictures and celebrating them for committing these acts. Whereas someone so much as chants a stupid radical slogan that no decent human being should ever chant, and we wholeheartedly condemn it. As Golda Meir said many years ago, so thoughtfully, if the Jews put down their guns today, there'd be slaughter. If the Arabs put down their guns today, there'd be peace. And that's what really defines the conflict. The fact that entreaties to some kind of peace process have led to violent riots by the Arabs should be evidence enough of this. So in this segment, I'm going to talk about the situation with the Arabs, and I'm going to break that up into talking about the Palestinian situation, and then I'll move over to the Israeli-Arab situation, because that will tie in nicely with the political jockeying that's going on in the coalition talks, and that should make for a smooth transition. Well, Mahmoud Abbas has surprisingly, I know you're shocked, as shocked as I am, I don't know, maybe somebody told you this might happen, postponed elections for the Palestinian Authority, and that means that, or at least he's seriously discussing postponing them. They haven't had an election in 15 years, so obviously now would be the time to push those elections off even farther. And I love seeing the headlines about things like this, because then they say, but he risks alienating international community supporters. He's going to alienate his support in the international community by pushing off elections. And I just have to say, now that the United States is sending the Palestinians $250 million, that's alienation right there. Nothing says I feel alienated from the international community like a whole ton of money. $250 million, that's a lot of money, a little bit of chump change there. So if I were Mahmoud Abbas, I'd be feeling really alienated right now. And as an American taxpayer, I'm feeling a little exasperated. After all, my tax dollars are now going to pay for the ongoing dictatorship of a group of people. So the oppression of a group of people by a dictator, right? And on top of that, that group of people is then being paid to terrorize another group of people. That's the wonderful thing. It's a great thing for us to pay for. So, $250 million, feeling really alienated now. So obviously, Mahmoud Abbas is making a huge strategic error by putting off elections, because that's alienating him from the international community, all $250 million of alienation that he's feeling right now. In any case, I hope you can laugh along with me on this. I try not to, I reach a point. It's like sometimes you just have to let it go, okay? Have a little laugh about these things, that they get ridiculous after a while. So this is the situation that prevails on their side. Dictatorship, riots, firing rockets into Israel. This is their strategy for handling the present situation. And there's talk of a third intifada. Intifada in Arabic means uprising or revolt. Basically, the first intifada took place just before the Gulf War, during the prime ministership of Yitzhak Shamir, and then that ultimately kind of petered out with the Oslo Accords. And then second intifada, of course, was launched right after negotiations were made significant progress toward peace in 1999 and 2000, when Yasser Arafat sabotaged that process. Again, I mentioned Dennis Ross's book, The Missing Piece, and he talks about that. And that intifada led to a lot of Israeli deaths. As I mentioned, that nightclub bombing alone was a horrible, horrible event. We discussed that in a previous episode. And now they're talking about a third. Obviously, with rockets flying from Gaza and that kind of thing, this is not a time when Israel wants to be engaging in any kind of military action. The Israelis have internal political problems they want to sort out first. For example, who should continue to be prime minister? Should Bibi continue to be prime minister or someone else? If so, what? What's the coalition going to look like? It's going to be center-left, center-right. Israelis are focused on internal problems, and obviously the Palestinian Authority is taking advantage of that, and Hamas, the two main terrorist organizations, Fatah, which runs the Palestinian Authority in the Shomron and Yehuda, what the international press calls the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip is run by Hamas. It's Hamastan. It's their little their little enclave where they rule with an iron fist. If you speak out against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, you're going to be treated very much like you might have been treated under Joseph Stalin's regime in the Soviet Union. In fact, they might not even be as nice as Stalin was. Stalin had a way of just having people executed. The Hamas likes to torment and torture people before they die. So this is where they are. Elections postponed, probably. Violence. They have a pretty good chance of getting something of what they want by complaining about this. I mean, they're certainly getting plenty of money. So they're achieving results. As for the Arab-Israeli situation, now I will, backing up for just a minute. As I've said before, I don't have an anti-Arab bias myself. I know a lot of Israelis are very callous about Arab Israelis to a certain degree just because there's been so much conflict and so many problems. But with that said, there has been hope, and I have expressed it, that Mansour Abbas and Ra'am are ready to work with the government to start to address the domestic policy issues that relate to the Arab-Israeli community. They have huge problems with organized crime, poverty, they have housing issues. It would be much better if someone from the Arab world were to step forward and take leadership, take ownership of that situation. Well, in that optimism, the sort of the other side of that coin is the danger of bringing an Islamist party into the coalition. I don't really see that danger as strongly as some others do. There's definitely a Trojan horse theory being pushed by a lot of people on the Israeli right. The fact is, I think Mansour Abbas is here opportunistically to make himself the hero of the Arab-Israeli community and to advance his own political career by achieving results for them by joining the government. And since both his party and Netanyahu and the Israeli right are steadfastly anti-Iran, that is something where we share common interests. So, kind of like the Abrahamic Accords, we have this common consensus that Iran is bad, Iran is the enemy of Israel and the Arabs, and so that major national security concern in front would be something to have a common interest on. However, dealing with the Palestinians would be a very different matter. And now that they're rising up and making trouble, that has raised that issue. Israel National News, I've mentioned a number of news sites where you can get kind of day-to-day news. Haaretz will give you the far-left news in Israel, so if you want far-left spin, go to Haaretz. Every now and then I schlep over there just because it's kind of fun to see what crazy headlines they have. It can be amusing. You can have yourself a good laugh. Times of Israel is more like American left. Jerusalem Post tries to be more centrist. They have some right-wing commentators and left-wing commentators, and so they try to be more newsworthy, but they have their own biases. Israel National News is pretty good for right-wing news if you're looking for a right-wing source. And INN has noted that if you they have an op-ed out about this, talking about how the Arab governments that Israel has made peace with, for example, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, these governments would never let Islamists anywhere near their government. People like Ra'am, Mansour Abbas, these guys who are part of Islamic movements, Islamist political parties, national Islamist parties, they wouldn't let those people anywhere near government in their countries because they know that these people are trouble. And so they've made a very fair argument, I think, for why Ra'am shouldn't have any involvement in the Israeli government. So if you're interested in that perspective, it's not mine. Precisely, as I've said, I think they're more concerned about domestic issues. But a lot of people on the Israeli right are concerned that Ra'am would be a Trojan horse to Islamist efforts to undermine Israel's defense policy and that kind of thing, because they say these parties have supported terrorism in the past and are anti-Zionist. And those are fair points. Those are things I cannot argue with. Again, my perspective is that these are the issues that are most concern to Mansour Abbas are domestic, which is why I think it wouldn't be such a terrible thing for him to deal with that. And again, Iran is the common enemy. Now, there are two ways in which the Arab parties could play a role in Israeli politics, of course. Ra'am isn't the only option. The Arab Joint List is also an option, which has one Jewish member of Knesset from Hadash. Mentioned he recently charged some police officers and got the snot knocked out of him for it. And, so he's obviously not all that incredibly bright. But that explains the Joint List for you, I guess. In any case, the Joint List is made up of parties that are secular nationalist, anti-Zionist, militantly anti-Zionist, communist, like Hadash, and just generally, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, they're so completely antithetical to the mainstream of Israeli politics, so completely out of step with anything you'll find among the other parties outside of Joint List or Ra'am, that it's difficult to imagine them participating in any government gainfully, even if they wanted to. I mean, you look at guys like Ahmed Tibi, if he wanted to be part of a government, if he thought it would be beneficial to him or that it would somehow advance his career, it's still difficult to imagine him being able to play a constructive role of any kind. Even for Mansour Abbas, again, his focus on domestic issues has been part of that process, but it's still a little bit tricky for him too, considering that the positions he's taken in the past and the things he supports. So either way, it's looking increasingly like whatever happens, there's going to need to be some kind of Arab party in the government in order for the anti-Bibi or pro-Bibi parties, those two blocks, to form a coalition, unless there's some breaking of the ranks. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, because obviously there's a desire to get parties to break ranks with their particular blocks and that kind of thing, but it's just not happening. So, you're talking about either a government led by Bibi with all of his natural allies and the ultra-Orthodox parties and the religious Zionist party, where Bezalel Smotrich has been very anti-Arab in his rhetoric and is not willing to join a government with, as he says, an Arab Trojan horse party involved in the coalition. You have that, possibly with Yamina coming out to 59 seats. So that coalition could be propped up by Ra'am from outside the coalition. So without joining the coalition, Ra'am could vote for Bibi to be prime minister and then just keep supporting him in votes of confidence so that Bibi doesn't lose his office. But basically, it would be a right-wing religious government at that point. Okay, so that's one option. But on the other side of that, if the anti-Bibi coalition is going to put itself together, even with Yamina, they're at 58. They're a seat short of where Bibi would be. And even that, I mean, as I've talked about before, that requires so much give and take. It really is a unity government we're talking about there. We're talking about Meretz and Labor, far-left parties sitting in government with far-right parties like Yisrael Beitenu. More on them in a second, by the way. I'm not going to let Avigdor Lieberman off for some of the things that are going on here. Anyway, they're still at 58 seats, which means they would need the votes of Ra'am or the Joint List to carry them over the 61-seat threshold. So where are those votes going to come from? Unless somebody breaks ranks. And again, let's just assume for the moment, for the sake of this debate, this particular mental exercise, that there's that no one is going to break ranks. So where does that leave us? That means someone, somewhere, some coalition, either those who are pro-Bibi or those who are anti-Bibi, are going to form a government backed by Arab parties. And again, as the Israel National News op-ed pointed out, this is this could be considered or construed as a Trojan horse of Islamists gaining access to Israeli politics. All right, and that's a perspective. Interesting point. But that's still going to be unstable, and especially on the center-left. Already talks about who's going to be prime minister for the center-left are kind of breaking down. There's been a gulf, a growing space between Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, for example. And Bennett wants Yair Lapid and his group to recommend him to be prime minister so that President Reuven Rivlin, everybody calls him Ruby, so Ruby Rivlin can task Bennett with forming a government. But then Lapid is afraid, if Bennett is tasked with forming the government, that he's going to turn right around and work out some kind of a rotation deal with Bibi. Because, obviously, Naftali Bennett is going to do what's in Naftali Bennett's best interest. So the center-left is saying they're going to support Lapid, and then Lapid can negotiate rotations in office and that kind of thing. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. What they're talking about now is Lapid as prime minister, possibly in rotation with Bennett, and Benny Gantz as defense minister, Gideon Sa'ar as justice minister, and so on and so forth. So they're kind of doling out ministries to all of the different and sundry parts of that potential coalition. And again, the only way this happens is with Arab votes, unless somebody breaks ranks. Right, so before I go on, I need to take a pound of flesh from Avigdor Lieberman, the leader of the Yisrael Beitenu party. And this is something that a little bit personal, because I've liked what he's said in the past at times, and I've been someone who has publicly advocated for his party occasionally in certain elections, especially when they ran with Likud, as something of as I've said, a reluctant Bibi supporter that I've been in the past. And Avigdor Lieberman left Bibi's circle over 20 years ago and started this Yisrael Beitenu party, Israel is Our Home, this sort of Russian secular nationalist party. And he's been running to the right of Bibi ever since. Now, he has a right to do that, and he staked out that position, and he's got a voting base. And to prop up that voting base, he's made a number of inflammatory statements over the years, not least of which saying that Israeli Arab national ambitions belong with the other side of the Green Line. So he has implied strongly that communities like Al-Fam and other Arab communities in Israel could be moved over to the Palestinian state if a Palestinian state is ever established. So he's one of those people who thinks that Israeli Arabs should ultimately become, most of them, part of a Palestinian state. Obviously, Israeli Arabs don't want that. Surprise, surprise, something about freedom of speech and economic opportunity that people really appreciate. But this is something he's said in the past. I disagree with such statements. I don't know that Israel should make any such move. But at the same time, this is how he's propped himself up with the secular right. For me, I've appreciated some of his rhetoric moving around the conflict. He spent a lot of time talking about, well, Israel should consider, make an application to join the European Union and force Europeans to have this problem of, should Israel be admitted, NATO, things like that. He's worked on this idea of just making European governments and the allies have become very complacent about Israeli security, and so he's finding new ways to make them uncomfortable with the situation, so that they have to acknowledge that Israel, to a certain degree, Israel are the good guys, that Israel could be a member of the European Union, Israel could be a member of NATO, and obviously no Arab country could. In fact, at this point, it's not even clear why Turkey is still a member of NATO, and NATO really should kick Turkey out post-haste. Very dangerous situation having Turkey in NATO. In any case, another story for another time. So Lieberman has this position. So all this time, he's had all this language about, Israeli Arab national ambitions belong with the Palestinians and all this kind of thing. And now he is sitting in a unity coalition, talks with Yair Lapid about forming this unity coalition, potentially backed by Arab communists and nationalists and anti-Zionists, just to get rid of Bibi, because he says Bibi is the big threat to Israel. So at this point, either Avigdor Lieberman is completely full of bull hockey, and everything he has said over the last 20 years has been nothing more than a bunch of hot air, and he's willing to bring anti-Zionist Israeli Arabs into the government, something that he should say is dangerous. He should, just like Smotrich, be out there saying, no, we can't do this Trojan Horse. We can't. If he's genuine, if he really believes the things he believes, he should be objecting to that. And yet, the silence is deafening. He's just sitting there waiting for this thing to come out. Because, of course, it's in his best interest to see Bibi go down. He has a personal stake in this. So either he's completely full of it, or a complete opportunist, what a surprise that might be. Or he just has no spine whatsoever. I mean, he's completely against his political agenda. So Avigdor Lieberman has just about lost the last inkling of respect I have for him. And he's a complete hypocrite at this point. And I think that his voters hopefully will learn from this and grow and find other parties to vote for. You know, there are other right-wing parties that are led by people who have integrity, and maybe it's time to go support those parties. Yeah, Avigdor Lieberman is never going to convince me that Bibi Netanyahu is a greater threat to Israel and Israeli security and Israeli politics than having the Joint List prop up a government in Israel. That just isn't going to work. Sorry, Avi, you're just you're out there. That's a little far-fetched, so I'm done with that. I have no further patience for that kind of opportunism. And, I'm not going to say Bibi's the greatest guy or that he's perfect. Like I said, I've been a reluctant Bibi supporter for a while. I'm not sure he should continue as prime minister. I'm really, honestly, fairly excited about Nir Barkat, who's a potential successor of his. Nir Barkat, by the way, has said if Bibi does retire, Barkat will seek the leadership of Likud, and he will have a good chance at winning it, obviously. Anyway, so that's the situation with Lieberman and some of the hypocrisy we're getting, for him to have such inflammatory language all those years and now somehow try to argue that Bibi continuing in office is worse than all the things he's called out as threats to Israel all these years. Wow, that's a hard pill to swallow. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to take that one. All right, so the next issue now is will people break ranks? Right? What would entice them? So in a recent call on Friday, Bibi called Benny Gantz. Now, Benny Gantz is in the current sort of this temporary coalition, this sort of minor caretaker government that can't make big decisions. I mentioned them making military decisions together. So Benny Gantz is still in the government. And Bibi called him up on Friday and pitched to him the idea of his having the first go as prime minister. That if Benny Gantz would join the coalition, Bibi would give him the first year as prime minister if Bibi stays in the prime minister's residence. He doesn't leave the residence, but Benny Gantz would be the prime minister for the first year, followed by Bibi for 2 years, and then Benny again for a year after that. Now, Benny Gantz has rehabilitated himself a little bit, but he's lost a lot of ground after, obviously, joining a unity government with Bibi over the virus emergency when he had promised not to. So the likelihood that he'd take that is not good. Bibi may have made a major political miscalculation in bringing on this election, which he did in order to prevent Gantz from becoming prime minister in the first place. So that's one option. Now, there's the possibility that Bibi will make the same offer to other leaders like Gideon Sa'ar and Avigdor Lieberman in the hopes of wooing them into the coalition that he could have enough votes to have a majority. So as Bibi is kicking around this idea of offering the premiership to various and sundry candidates on the other side, possibly to Lieberman and Sa'ar and these guys, to try to shake them loose from the opposition coalition, those opposed to Bibi's continuance in office, so that he can try to get back in. He's trying to pry them loose, and it's not clear that's going to work. Again, it's hard to trust him, considering why he called this election in the first place. The election happened because he didn't want to let Benny Gantz become PM. And so this has an air of desperation to it, and that's not necessarily a good thing from Bibi's point of view. There's also been some talk, some chatter. It's not clear if these are rumors or things that are actually being discussed behind closed doors, but I share them anyway because they might actually be things that are being discussed deliberately. And that is that Bibi could step back from the prime ministership, again remaining in the prime minister's residence, allowing someone else from Likud to take over for him. In the meantime, someone like Levin or Yuval Steinitz or someone close to Bibi that he could control. So he'd still remain essentially in the leadership position. The Israeli media is calling this the Medvedev contingency. That's kind of a funny thing. When Vladimir Putin ran up against term limits in 2008, after serving 2 terms as president, he had his Secretary of State, his foreign minister, Medvedev, run for president, and he took on the job of prime minister. No one bought it. Everyone knew better, that Vladimir Putin was still the absolute ruler of Russia, and this guy Medvedev was just acting as president so that, Putin could make a good show of it. And then, of course, in 2012, Putin ran for president again, and since then, Russia has amended its constitution to allow the president to serve as many terms as he likes. Might as well. I mean, why not call a spade a spade? He's president for life. They might as well have a faux election every 4 years and just accept that as it is. In any case, so in Israel, this is being called the Medvedev option, that Bibi would remain in the prime minister's residence, the titular, he'd be ostensibly the head of the government, and there'd be a titular head who would have the office of prime minister, who would not be Bibi. And the hope seems to be to coax Gideon Sa'ar over that way to join the government in that regard. Will that work? Who knows? On the other side, there's talk that United Torah Judaism might be willing, the Ashkenazic Orthodox Party, if there is a likelihood that Lapid is given, if Lapid is given the mandate to form a coalition, and there's a likelihood that a coalition might form. There's been some backroom chatter that UTJ might come over to keep the Arabs out of the government and to protect their interests, but also to keep the finance ministry, to keep their man in control of some of the Knesset's money spending ability. That would protect ultra-Orthodox interests to a degree. And in that case, obviously, Arab votes would not be necessary to prop up the government since UTJ has 7 votes. So then if they could get the whole anti-Bibi coalition plus Yamina, then they would add UTJ's votes from outside the coalition, and that would be 65, and that would do the job temporarily. So there's talk of this. A little bit of last-minute working by Bibi, some talk of maybe prying some parties away from one side or the other, and it's getting there. Now, what could happen here, we don't know. Maybe Bibi just goes ahead and steps aside and let someone else take over. It's not likely. If he were to retire now, announce his retirement, and leave the prime minister's residence, or be willing to leave, he would have a much less ignominious end than Maggie Thatcher, who was just literally thrown out of number 10 after 11 years in office, with a party that went in a very different direction after her. And in fact, 5 years later would lose control, 6 years later, would lose control of parliament because the left would take on Maggie Thatcher's economic policies. And, funny thing, if you lose certain political ground, the opposition can take up that political ground and use it to clobber you. In any case, Bibi would remain very prominent and very powerful in Likud. Among its 3,800 Central Committee members, he's very popular. Among the 100,000-odd members of the Likud party, he is still very prominent and very popular. So he could influence what goes on after that. Nir Barkat, who was mayor of Jerusalem, directly elected mayor of Jerusalem, is a very competent leader and could take over Likud and run the country without the Bibi issue, taking the personal issue out of it. And it would be a government that would still have the strength. Yes, it'd be a new prime minister. Yes, the Arabs would want to test that prime minister, but it would be a strong right-wing Israeli government led by someone who is known to be a competent right-wing leader, who has experience as an executive, and who could competently lead the country. There's no doubt. If you can run a city the size of Jerusalem, then you are competent at least to spend the first day in the prime minister's office and lead the cabinet and work toward learning what you need to learn to run the country, especially with the help of Netanyahu and others. Bibi just seems to be determined to hold on to office. And this, again, as I've stated from the beginning, is a lot of what gives credibility. It offers credibility to Lapid's point that, and Gideon Sa'ar and all these people who say Bibi is the problem. He personally wants to stay in office, and that is the issue. It lends credence to that point, I have to say. On the other hand, the pro-Bibi argument that it's not time to change horses right now, that Israel's in a dangerous place, I can see that too. Bibi has been a competent leader for the last 12 years and over almost 3 years before. He could continue to lead the country now. So these are the issues we're going to work out. The Israelis are going to work out here in the next couple weeks. Will Bibi form a coalition? It's not looking good for him. If he doesn't, honestly, I think it's time that he just go ahead and call it quits. He's got trials to deal with. He may beat those charges, but his time as prime minister may have come to an end. But we will find out in the next exciting chapter of the Israeli election saga. In any case, whatever happens, it is my supreme hope and my prayer to Hashem, Bizrat Hashem, Israel will be safe. That means with God's help. Israel will be safe and protected. Its citizens will live without fear, and that they will have a government that can keep them safe and protected. So no one has to feel insecure. Our people have felt insecure and lived under the threat of annihilation for many years in the past, and it really is time to live in freedom from fear and in peace and prosperity. So with that, I will say goodbye and להתראות.
אולי נפליגה בספינות מחוף אילת עד חוף שלהם, ועל המשחטות הישנות יטעינו תפוחי זהב. כל זה אינו משל ולא חלום, זה נכון כאור בצהריים. כל זה